All right. So about 7 years ago, I did a video called 70s Cop Show Music, and that video went down really well, and I've had loads of requests over the years to do a deep dive on how to do that sort of music. And one of the reasons I did that track at the time was because I had a Rhodes in the studio, and I thought, if I borrow a Rhodes again, I will use that as the excuse to finally make that video. And it's only taken 7 years, but Rhodes themselves got in touch and said, hey, one of our new Mark 8s is doing a tour of the UK. Do you want to borrow it? And I said, let's take it downtown. Or perhaps to the YMCA. So we're going to start on the Rhodes with a series of chords. So those chords do a number of things. First of all, they tell us that this is going to be dramatic and yet funky. It also allows us to keep our powder dry. It gives us some impact. Something's going to happen. But rhythmically, it's quite spacious. We're saving the rhythm for the drop. We want to hold that back. If you want an impact, the way you set that up is by doing something different before it. If you go all in before a moment of impact, you've got nowhere to go. So hold back, and then when we drop, you'll hear the funk. So we're building this up. The other thing it's got is a chromatic climb. The top notes of the chords are walking up chromatically, apart from a tone at the end to F sharp. And actually what I did was started with that and then built the chords down from there. And I actually just used my ear and found chords that I liked the sound of and then worked out what I'd done afterwards. And what you're trying to avoid are just minor and major chords. They're just too boring. They don't sound right. You want crunch and smush. You want lots of that semitone action going on. That's how you get this sound. So my first chord is F sharp in the bass, then B, C sharp, F and A, which gives me a minor major 11 chord is what's going on there. And that's the kind of smush and crunch you want. The next chord really is just a B flat major 7, first inversion, D, F, A, and B flat. But over F sharp, it winds up as an F sharp major 7 sharp 9. And we've got that lovely crunch there and an F against F sharps. So you've got and that. That's what you want, that kind of sound. Next one, we've got this, which is E, G sharp, A and B over F sharp minor 11. Next one, we've got a C major triad over F sharp, which is, would you call it C over F sharp? I think it's a polychord really. It's that Bernard Herrmann thing where you have two, where he would do two major chords a tritone apart, and so it has that kind of dramatic but in a vintage way feel to it instead of modern dramatic, which tends to be terrifying. And then we have this chord, and this is another thing. We're getting a bit of tension, then a bit of release, a bit of and then and then and then So we've got an F sharp major 7 sus 2, F sharp, G sharp, C over the F sharp. And then we want a bit of our tension again. So that's what we do with this chord. So that is an F, A, B, D. So it's a D minor 6, but over F sharp. I guess you would call that an F sharp minor major 11 sharp 5 or something like that. Again, less about the technical names of the chords, more about the sound, the smush, the crush. So it's kind of a polychord really. And that's something to experiment with. Try taking two unrelated chords and stacking them on top of each other and then mixing the notes together. And then we walk up to this. And this is really hard to describe what this is, because we've got an F sharp, then we've got an F and an A sharp and a D sharp. So we've got loads of smush in there. It's kind of an E flat major chord there, with an F major squashed into the middle of it, which is kind of polychord territory again. Again, about the sound, less about the technicalities of what it's called. And then we end up, and this chord was deliberate, I thought about this, which was a C sharp 7 flat 5 to walk us to F sharp. So that's C sharp 7, flatten the 5th, you get an altered chord, and you can sharpen the 5th, you can add a flat 9 with a normal 5th or a flat 5, you can add all sorts of intervals to one of these. That's really nasty. So I've got, just shove all the intervals in there, because it's all about oh my goodness, we're going to go to F sharp, and then we're in. And then in terms of sound, you've got a really nice vary pan on here. So you can make it go left and right. Can you hear that? If you've got stereo speakers or headphones, and you can speed that up, or you can make it a deeper effect. And some phaser, and I've got a bit of compressor on here as well. An analog phaser. It's got loads of effects on here that you can control, and there's some secondary function as you hold down the buttons. You can bring in external control voltages and foot pedals and things. So there we get some motion and some modulation with the phaser and the vary pan. So whilst we're holding those chords, we're getting a bit of motion there, which is a really nice effect. So that's the sound I'm going to use for that intro section. Once we're in F sharp, we're going to move over to our riff, and you can drive the preamp on this, and there's a little bit of envelope modulation of the mid frequencies that you can apply as well. Give it a little bit of bite. Then we're going to have this. And then, so what we've got here is our just absolute classic 7 sharp 9 chord. So or the Hendrix chord as it's known. So the Hendrix way of voicing it would be the root, the 3rd, the 7th, so a dominant 7th, and then the sharp 9. But if you take the sharp 9 down the octave, you wind up with one of these semitone scrunches. Because we've enharmonically, we've got a minor and a major 3rd. And you can move those down and then up. They just slide around all over the place. Great for this kind of sound. And then we're riffing that over an F minor riff. Yeah? And then we have another 7 sharp 9 chord. But this is a G sharp 7 sharp 9. But I'm doing it over F sharp. The wrong chord. There are no wrong chords. It's all about what it sounds like. Nice and crunchy. And it also foreshadows that we're going to move up to G sharp. And that is a classic move. The blues thing of going from the root up a 4th. So if you were in C, you'd go up to F. Well, cooler than that is you go up a tone from... That's funkier. So we're going to do that. So then we are going to go to the dominant chord, the C sharp 7. But instead of riffing like we've been doing so far or playing chords, we're going to just play a really simple melody. And this is a great technique to use with your arranging. If you want to create contrast and have different sections and keep it interesting, have the instrumental parts change their role from section to section. So instead of just doing the same thing all the time, they might be on an accompaniment at one point, and then they might be taking the lead on the next point. They might be playing chords at one point. They might be playing something monophonic at the next point. This is how you create contrast without adding loads of parts. You try to keep the number of parts in the arrangement to as few as possible. So I'm just going to play a little melody around that C#7. Really simple, whilst all the motion will come from the other instruments. And this serves as the little light relief. So it's a serious cop show. We've established that with those chords early on. But now we're going lighter because, you know, they're human beings. They're characters we can relate to in our cop show. And, you know, I don't know, maybe a couple of the rookie cops, they're in competition with one another, but maybe they got a bit of a crush on one another. So that's kind of represented in this part of the theme. Then we go back and do all our riffs again before we go to an end section, which is the same as the intro section. See what we've done there? But we're going to diminish the rhythmic value. So instead of everything taking 8 beats, it's going to take 4 beats. So that is building up the urgency just by changing the arrangement rhythmically. Really easy technique, something to try. And then the last thing we do is a cliche, and it's a great one, so I thought I'd include it, which is you take a cluster chord, a load of semitones, and then you throw those notes out wide across the octaves and across the orchestra or the ensemble. And you hear this so much in old scoring. So let's take the C sharp. So we'd play that down low. Then we want a D, so we'll play that up here. And then we want an E flat, so we'll play that down here. And then we want the E, so we put that up there. And then we'll put an F down there. So we're going, oh my goodness, oh that kind of thing. And it's just building up that tension of like this, but without you having all the notes clustered in the same place. You're spreading them out to get that sound. And then you can keep going. Once you know what that is, you'll hear it so much when you watch old films or listen to old music. It's just a great trick. So I use that at the end. Also because it sets us up to end on F sharp. And that is the end of this part. It's the end of the Rhodes. So we've done the composition. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of the arrangement and the production. Drums first. So the library I'm going to use for this is Native Instruments Abbey Rhodes 70s Drummer. This has been out for years, and they did a series of them: 30s, 40s style vintage kit, 50s style, 60s style, 70s, 80s, and a modern kit. And they just focused on the fundamentals and, in my opinion, absolutely nailed it. So I'm going to use the 70s Drummer. I'm going to start with the 70s Funk mix preset, but I'm going to then tweak it from there. So I'm going to make it slightly drier than I would want, because I'm then going to run it through, funnily enough, Abbey Rhodes vinyl from Waves. So this is the basic sound. Then once I add Waves, we get tape saturation, and we bring out the room mics through the compression. Hence I back them off a little bit in the mix. Then I've used a convolution of an EMT 240 plate reverb from Past to Future. And I'm just going to have one reverb that I use on the mix for everything, because that's the way they would have done it back in the day. So this is my total drum mix. Next, percussion. This is a big thing for this style of music. So first we need some great sounding bongos. I don't have any, so we're going to use a VST. And years ago, Cinesamples did Cineperc, which is one of many libraries they did, which still sounds fantastic to this day. And there's a really great sounding set of bongos in there. I'm going to change the mix and lean on the close mics with a bit of overhead. I'm going to use Abbey Road vinyl again and put it in mono and pan it slightly left. And here are our bongos. Then we're going to use the timpani patch from the same library. And again, we're going to put it through Abbey Road vinyl, put it in mono and pan it slightly right, so we have some timpani emphasis on the starts of notes and the starts of sections. And never underestimate the power of the box, or in my case, tub of percussion. This is really inexpensive And you can add some shaker or maracas or cabasa or tambourine or claves or cowbell to some programmed drums and give them a human feel. So here's some shaker and tambourine. And then if we put our entire drum and percussion mix together, we get... Next, bass. I'm just going to record this DI like they probably would have back in the day, maybe even straight into the desk. I'm going to go into my Ibanez RM80, add a little bit of bass and a little bit of saturation so it compresses it a little bit. And this is my bass sound. And then I'm going to double that with a synthesizer, but using bandpass filtering, so we get some definition to the top of the sound, but without adding more bass, which will muddy the bottom end of the mix. So let's talk about guitars. So I've recorded guitars in many ways over the years, and I'm yet to find anything that sounds better than just taking a valve amp and sticking an SM57 on the cab. It just sounds like a guitar. So if it's not broken, why fix it? Thankfully, that's not an expensive investment. Valve amps start at about 450 quid less second hand, and an SM57 is like 100 quid. So for the guitar part, we want to reinforce what the Rhodes is doing. We're going to play the riff on the low strings, but then hit the stabs on the top strings at the same time, so they're working together. And we're obviously going to need wah-wah. And I've got a bunch of wah pedals, including 70s ones, which should be the right fit for this project, but ironically, the one that sounds the best is a modern one, which is the Vox V846HW. I've had this for about 10 years. I bought it new. What you want with wah, because it's bandpass filtering, is you want you don't want that like really inner ear, like ouch, sweeping through the middle. Neither do you want it to be too subtle. You want a sweet spot in between, and the Vox pedal seems to capture that. So here is the raw sound of one guitar going through a valve amp and an SM57. So then we have a second guitar part playing up the octave, and we pan those out left and right, take out the bottom end. We don't want any bottom end in our guitars, and send it to our one reverb effects send. And here's the mix. So let's talk about brass. So the library I'm going to use is Native Instruments Session Horns Pro. This is, again, an old library. I've only been using it the last couple of years, but what it gives you is a really dry upfront sound with no room baked into it. And then it's got loads of articulations. It's got things like rips and doits and falls and trills and forte piano crescendos and different types of short notes, because not all short notes are the same. And depending upon the phrase and the context, you're going to want different types of shorts and different types of articulations, and runs up into notes and falls off of notes. And having all that under your fingers with key switching is really, really important. The next thing to think about is your programming. Brass instruments, they blow into them and the air then travels through, and there's that initial moment where they're just making the instrument speak, and the sample will capture that. But the actual, if the sample starts there, the actual downbeat would be just after it. That's how the brass players play. They play just ahead of the beat to anticipate that, that moment of making the air run through the instrument. So if you play it in and quantize it, it's not going to sound right. And there's nothing worse than samples that are lagging behind the beat. So use your ear and make it sound right, not look right. It should not be quantized grid-like MIDI. It should be a bit of a mess, but it will sound right. The other thing is play the parts in one at a time and do it as parts. Don't play chords and play it like a pianist. Play it like individual parts, which is how you get that realism. And then when you put them all together, you'll get the total sound. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the low brass to emphasize the bass line. And then when we, in the middle section, for example, want a melody, we're just going to have everybody stack that melody in octaves. And I've got a flute, passion flute, which is a really funky sounding flute on the top as well to really help it cut through. So here's a section where we've got the lower horns playing the bass line, and then with they've got a bit of rasp, and they help that cut through in the mix. And then we've got the melody stacked in the upper brass. So then let's move over to the processing. We're going to do the same sort of mix processing where we use Waves Abbey Road vinyl, and we're going to use some Kramer tape on it, and we're going to take out some bottom end because we want the rasp and the bite, but we don't want the bass. We're going to leave that to the bass guitar. And then we're going to send it to our one effects end. So here's the same section, but just with processing. So for the next brass example, we've got a section where the Rhodes is playing the melody, so we don't want to fight with that. We're going to do a little counter melody that goes underneath it, and we're going to take out the lower brass and just use the upper brass just to play that counter melody with the flute. And then we've got some stabs at the end, and everybody comes together to hit those stabs so they're emphasized. Sounds like this. And then the next example, when we're back into the riff and we're hitting it hard, we're going to have that lower brass rasping away, hitting the riff, really making the riff stand out as much as possible. And the upper brass then going to work together, going to have some little phrases, and we're also going to have those stabs together. And that's what you want, just really two things going on, lower brass, upper brass. You don't want loads of motion and movement. It will get too muddy. So here's that example. And then for our final example, we've got those swells at the end, and the original Rhodes part is low note chord, low note chord. We'll just do that as well. That will help it all stand out, and it will help it all work together. So lower brass hits that F sharp, and then the upper brass hit the chords with a swell, and it all comes together. Sounds like this. Okay, now some general tips, which hopefully are broadly useful. So firstly, I would say 90% of your mix is your composition, your arrangement, and your choice of sounds. Not to put down mix engineers, they do an incredible job, couldn't live without them, but I'm sure they would agree that if the music doesn't fundamentally work and there's things fighting and battling and it's a mess, it's going to be harder and harder to mix, and you can sort your mix out by sorting out your arrangement. So, for example, if we want something to come through like the riff, then have everybody hit that riff. Dun 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 dun. Don't need to put tons of stuff over the top of that. It will just make it harder to hear. So what else can we put over that? Well, we've got some stabs in the Rhodes, we've got some stabs on the guitar. Have the brass do it. Dum dum ba-da-ba-dum bum ba-dum bum 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 ba-da-ba-dum bum bum bum. Using parts, keeping it really simple, and it sounds big, even though there's not actually much going on. There's just kind of two things happening at once. Another tip is to think about how this sort of music would have been recorded originally, which would have been with a TV orchestra, a small ensemble. And you should think in parts and think about them, how they would have recorded it together. There might have been overdubs, but generally it would have just been people playing their part. And nowadays it's too easy to set up gazillions of tracks in your DAW and do like overdub and a bit of stuff there and a bit of stuff there and have 15 guitar tracks and this sort of stuff. But it won't help with the vibe and the realism of this style of music. If you are a bit disciplined and a bit strict and go, I've got two guitars and there's two guitar parts and I can't ever have any more than that, which is what I've done in this, then you'll get a more realistic sound. For example, at the end, I'm going to just bring in an improvised guitar solo. So one of the rhythm guitars clicks on their distortion pedal and plays a solo, and you lose their rhythm part temporarily while they're doing that, and then they go back to it. And if you approach it like that, you have the same number of brass, the same number of keyboards and things like that. It will sound more realistic. And I worked out that my piece that you'll hear in a moment could be played by less than 20 people realistically. If yours would need 57 people and some of them are only playing 3 notes in 2 notes or 1 bar here and there, have a rethink. Another big thing is to think about how it would have been originally mixed. So they would have had the tape machine running into the desk and they would have been working on the console, They'd have had some effects sends and maybe some things in line like compressors and things, but generally they would have had a limited number, not like now where you can just stick instances of plugins and effects all over the place, minimize it, have one reverb like they would have done. They would have had a plate reverb probably set up in a room with a mic on it, and they would send things out to it, have everything go to that one reverb, and approach it like that rather than having tons and tons of effects and processes going on at once. So if you're on my Patreon, depending on the tier, you can download the mix of the track you're about to hear, and or the mix stems, and or the raw audio, so you could do your own mix, which might be interesting. Huge thank you to my patrons for their ongoing support. Thank you to Rhodes for the loan of this. And of course, thank you to you for watching.